Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're tackling a tough but really important subject today. We're doing a deep dive into supporting a male survivor of sexual assault. You all requested this one to better understand the specific challenges these survivors face. And we're going to be looking at it all through this really powerful Reddit post.
Yeah, it's a really raw and honest account from a young woman trying to support her boyfriend after he was assaulted by two women in a Target store. It really shows just how complex navigating this situation can be, especially because it really challenges that stereotypical image of a sexual assault survivor.
Yeah, it definitely makes you confront your own assumptions, I think. A public place like Target,
Yeah.
intoxicated female perpetrators, a boyfriend with a previous shoulder injury who couldn't really defend himself. It all really challenges those preconceived notions we all have. So what really stood out to you in this post?
I think the girlfriend's initial reaction was what really got to me. She's clearly looking for advice and trying to be strong for her boyfriend, but she's also completely overwhelmed by it all. I think it's a good reminder that supporting a survivor is really tough, even for those closest to them.
Right. And she even says that she doesn't want generic advice, which I think speaks to the unique stigma around male sexual assault. It's like society expects men to just shrug it off,
Yeah,
be stoic and unemotional. And that can make it so much harder to seek help.
absolutely. And that's where the Reddit community comes in, I think. The advice she gets is surprisingly insightful and really cuts to the core of the issue. Like so many commenters really stress how important validation and encouragement are, and reassuring her that her boyfriend was right to press charges.
Yeah, I found that really interesting too, because it's not just about personal healing anymore. By pressing charges, he could prevent something like this from happening to someone else,
Right.
which adds a whole other layer to his decision.
Exactly. And it also goes against that misconception that men should just tough it out. The commenters are basically saying that it's okay for him to seek justice, acknowledge what happened was wrong, and take steps to protect himself and others.
It's a really powerful message, especially for men who may feel pressured to stay silent.
And it goes beyond legal action, too. There's a huge emphasis on therapy. Many commenters suggest specific types, too, like EMDR.
Oh, really? I've heard of EMDR,
Yeah.
but I never really understood how it works.
Yeah.
So it's not just talking about what happened, but using physical techniques to actually kind of rewire how your brain responds.
Exactly. There's more and more evidence that EMDR can be really good for treating PTSD and trauma. It helps people become less sensitive to those traumatic memories so they don't feel as intense or cause as much distress.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. It seems like the Reddit community is going above and beyond
Yeah.
to give actual resources and things she can actually do, not just empty words, but real guidance.
And what's even more impactful is that they don't shy away from talking about the stigma that men face with sexual assault. One commenter who's a survivor himself even wrote, "Society expects men to just be okay after something like this. But the reality is we're not. We hurt, we struggle, and we need support like anyone else."
That's so powerful. It really shows that internal conflicts so many men deal with as survivors. They're not only processing the trauma, but also dealing with all of these societal expectations that tell them how they should be feeling.
It's like being hit from both sides, and it can lead to isolation, shame, and make it so hard to get help.
So we've talked about validating him, the importance of therapy, and the stigma men face. What other support strategies do people suggest?
Well, one person suggested asking him open-ended questions like, "How can I best help you right now?" That acknowledges his needs might change and lets him communicate openly.
That makes sense. But wouldn't it be better to be more specific, like offer choices instead of making him figure out what he needs when he's already overwhelmed?
That's a great point. Another commenter actually suggests something similar, giving choices instead of just asking. Like, do you want company or to be alone right now? Or would you like a hug or to watch a movie?
So it's all about giving options, but still letting him decide what feels right at that moment, finding that balance between being proactive and not being too pushy.
Exactly. And there was another interesting suggestion about giving him little tasks to do.
Little tasks. What do you mean by that?
The idea is to kind of subtly reinforce his sense of strength and that he's useful. So instead of doing everything for him, ask for his help with something small, like opening a jar or fixing something minor.
That's pretty clever. It acknowledges what he can do without coming across as patronizing. But wouldn't that risk backfiring? Like, what if he thinks you're not taking his trauma seriously?
You're right, it's a delicate balance for sure. The key is to be sensitive and pay attention to how he reacts. If he's resisting or seems overwhelmed, then back off. But if he's open to it, it can be a way to nudge him back towards feeling normal and in control.
It's about reading the situation and responding in the right way. There's no one right answer, which is probably why the girlfriend was so desperate for advice.
Yeah, and that leads to a crucial point, her role in all of this. At first, she's lost and asking for help. But as you read the post, you see her actually using the advice, validating him, and even suggesting therapy.
It's really inspiring to see how she changes. She's not just passively taking in information,
Yeah.
but using it to help her boyfriend.
Right, and that's a key takeaway for anyone supporting a survivor. It's not about being a therapist or having all the answers. It's about being there, listening without judgment, and offering support however you can.
And realizing that you might need support too. She's not superhuman. She's just a woman dealing with a really hard situation with her boyfriend.
Totally. Supporting a survivor can be emotionally draining, so it's important for their loved ones to take care of themselves too.
Okay, so we've covered a lot here. The unique challenges male survivors face, the advice from Reddit, and how the girlfriend's role changes. But let's zoom out a little. What does this Reddit post tell us about society as a whole?
I think it really highlights how much stigma there is around male sexual assault. The fact that she felt she needed to ask strangers online for help shows just how much we need more open discussion and support systems for men in these situations.
Yeah, it's like society still can't accept that men can be victims too. We have all these ingrained stereotypes about what it means to be a man, that strength is about being stoic and vulnerability is weakness.
Exactly, and those stereotypes are so harmful. They prevent men from coming forward, getting help, and healing.
So connecting this to the bigger picture, it's not just about supporting individual survivors. It's about changing those societal norms that keep this silence and stigma going,
It's about building a culture where men feel safe and empowered to report assault, to seek help, and to heal without being judged or ridiculed.
which is a huge task. But this Reddit post, with its honesty and vulnerability, really is a powerful call to action. It reminds us that behind the statistics and the stereotypes, there are real people who are hurting, who are struggling, and who deserve our empathy and support.
It reminds us that this affects all of us in some way and challenges each of us to look at our own beliefs, educate ourselves, and fight for change. One thing that really stood out to me was how frustrated the girlfriend was with the legal system. She said they pressed charges, got a restraining order, and went through the whole court process, but she still felt like there was no justice because the outcome didn't really match how serious the crime was.
That's a really important point. We think of the legal system as this path to justice, but it's not always clear or satisfying. And for men who often face doubt and disbelief, it can be even more difficult.
Definitely. And in this case, the girlfriend even mentioned that the perpetrators tried to play the victim, which made her even more frustrated and just highlighted those societal biases.
It's like their trauma wasn't taken seriously because they didn't fit the typical image of a victim. I can only imagine how awful that must feel for the boyfriend.
Right. It's almost like society can't see a man as both strong and a victim of violence at the same time.
Which brings us back to why it's so important to challenge those stereotypes about gender. If we keep saying strength is about not showing emotions, then we're basically silencing anyone who doesn't fit that mold.
And we're creating a culture where asking for help means you're weak instead of brave.
So how do we even start to change that? It's one thing to see the problem, but actually changing those deep-seated beliefs is a whole other thing.
It's a tough one for sure. But I think it starts with being open and honest, like we are right now. We need to bring these issues out into the open, educate ourselves and others, and challenge those harmful stereotypes every time we see them.
And create spaces where being vulnerable is seen as a strength, where men can express how they feel and ask for help without being judged.
Exactly. It's about building a culture of empathy and understanding, where we listen to and believe survivors no matter their gender.
This deep dive into this Reddit post has been really eye-opening for me. It's really made me think about my own assumptions and biases when it comes to men and sexual assault.
I think that's what these personal stories can do. They let us connect with the human experience behind the numbers and headlines. They make us look at ourselves and ask, how can we do better? How can we be better allies and advocates?
And I think this post specifically, with all the practical tips it had, gives us a real place to start. It shows us real things we can do to help the male survivors in our lives.
It reminds us that supporting a survivor isn't about having all the answers or fixing things. It's about being there, listening without judgment, and offering support in a way that feels real and helpful.
And knowing that every person's needs are different. There's no one right way to heal.
For sure. It's a journey that takes patience, understanding, and a commitment to meeting them where they are.
So we've talked about the girlfriend's experience, the advice she got, and the legal side of things. But if we zoom out even further, we see the bigger picture. This isn't just one isolated event. It reflects a society that often doesn't see or address the unique challenges male survivors face.
So the question is, how do we create a culture where men feel safe and empowered enough to report assault, seek help, and heal without fear of judgment or ridicule?
It's a question that deserves our attention and requires us to go beyond just awareness and take action. We have to challenge the status quo, break down harmful stereotypes, and build a world where all survivors are seen, heard, and supported.
It's about making places where vulnerability equals strength, where empathy wins over skepticism, and where justice happens regardless of gender.
It feels like we've just scratched the surface here. We talked about immediate support, the legal system, and society as a whole. But what does it all mean for our listeners? How can they take all of this and actually do something with it?
That's the big question, isn't it? I think it all starts with awareness. We need to educate ourselves about how common male sexual assault is, the unique struggles survivors face, and how society often silences them.
Right, and it's not just about the numbers. It's about seeing the human impact, the real stories. This Reddit post showed us the emotional turmoil, the self-doubt, and how incredibly brave it is for a male survivor to come forward.
And it showed how important the people around them are. The girlfriend's journey trying to find the right support for her boyfriend, it reminds us that we don't have to be experts to make a difference. Sometimes just being there, listening without judging, and offering practical help can make a huge impact.
But isn't there a risk of oversimplifying it? I mean, she was clearly having a tough time, doubting if she could even give him the right support. It's not always as simple as just being there.
Oh, you're absolutely right. It can be really hard and complex to support a survivor. It takes patience, empathy, and realizing our own limits. We can't force someone to heal, and we can't take on their pain for them.
So it's about finding that balance between being supportive, but also knowing we're not therapists. We can offer love, compassion, and practical help. But ultimately, it's the survivor's journey to heal.
Exactly. And it's important to remember, healing isn't a finish line. There will be good and bad times, steps back and forward, and through it all, the most important thing we can give is our unwavering belief and support.
This whole deep dive has been eye-opening, but it's also made me feel responsible. Like, what can I, as one person, actually do to change things? It can feel so overwhelming.
I hear you. It's easy to feel helpless with such a big problem. But even small things can make a difference.
Like what? What are some examples?
Well, we can start by calling out those stereotypes about men whenever we see them, whether it's a joke, a comment, or just something society expects. Saying, that's not okay, can actually change things.
It's about changing how we see things, seeing vulnerability as strength, and letting men express themselves and ask for help without judgment.
Exactly. We can also support organizations that are working on this issue. There are some amazing groups out there providing counseling, legal help, and advocating for male survivors.
And educating ourselves and others. The more we understand about how common this is, its impact, and how complex it is, the better we can build a culture of support.
It's about breaking the silence, challenging the stigma, creating a world where all survivors, no matter who they are, feel safe, believed, and empowered to heal.
This deep dive has really shown how personal issues are connected to the bigger picture. The Reddit post is about one person's experience, but it represents a much larger problem that we need to pay attention to and do something about.
And it reminds us that change begins with each of us. By challenging our own biases, learning more, and speaking out against injustice, we can create a more just and compassionate world for everyone who's been through this.
I think that's a great place to end. This was a tough but really important talk, and I hope it made you think and maybe even feel that urge to be an ally and make a change.
As we wrap up, we want to leave you with one last thought. Imagine a world where being a man or a woman doesn't change how we see and respond to trauma. A world where vulnerability is welcomed, support is there when you need it, and justice isn't blind to gender. What will you do to help create that world?